Kutesiches Chelek Chav Beis Kedoshim Aleph Lili Nishmis Reb Yosef ben Yamin ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. Today we're going to discuss the mitzvah of Orla and the concept of Isser Chefze and Isser Gavra. There's an Isser that's on the object becomes Asr, and there's a certain type of Isser that is on the person. The object itself is not inherently problematic, but the person is not allowed to engage or to use it depending on the circumstances. And the question is going to be, is Isser Orla, is it an Isser Gavra, or is it an Isser Chefza? And we're going to learn this in the context of a Rashi. We're going to ask a number of questions on Rashi, and we're going to discover that once we understand what's bothering Rashi, the Rashi will make beautiful, beautiful sense. And it'll actually address this question, Gavra or Chefza. In Pasuk v'chisaveyu ala aretz unetatem goymer v'araltem goymer piriyoi shalei shanim yiyelachem arelim le'yachel. The Pasuk says like this: v'chisaveyu ala aretz. If you're going to come to the land, when you're going to come to the land of Eretz Yisrael, unetatem kol eitz machal, and you will plant a fruit tree, a tree that has edible fruits on it. V'araltem or losoi es piriyoi. The fruit will become arla. Arla, Rashi says, means atum. It's blocked, meaning to say it's not usable. You're not allowed to use it for 3 years. For 3 years, these fruit are arelim. They are blocked from your usage. They should not be eaten. That's what the pasuk says. Rashi quotes these words from the pasuk. For 3 years, they should be arelim. When is mefaresh me'emasai. When do you start the count? Mishas netiyosai, from when the tree was planted. Let him mefarshim. So the mefarshim explain. As the mitmeid Rashi bavaran, and what Rashi is addressing here is as the minion from the shalishanim is nit misha sha'isa pri. The mishas netiyosai. When do the 3 years start? Not from when the tree begins to sprout fruit. You would say once there's fruit, now for 3 years. It's arla. So Rashi says no, it doesn't start from when the tree begins to give the fruit. Rather, nor mishas netiyosai, from when the tree was planted. Und das lernt man up von dem Wort unetatem, and this is learned. The Mefarshim say this is known from the pasuk, from the word of the pasuk unetatem, and you will plant, because it could have not said that word. It could have said chisavei la'aretz, and there'll be an eitz machal. Obviously, it's unetatem. Obviously, it's planted. The fact that the pasuk says the word unetatem loymar mishas netiya moinen. This teaches us that the count of 3 years begins from the planting of the tree. So this is how the Mefarshim explain Rashi. There's a second part to Rashi, which we'll get to later on in the Sikha. For now, we're going to focus on this first part of the Rashi. Rashi is telling us that because it says unetatem in the pasuk, we know that the count begins mishas netiya from the time of the planting of the tree. Darfman verstehen, so the Rebbe is going to ask 3 questions. Aleph, if the proof that you're counting from when the tree was planted is from the pasuk, from the word in the pasuk unetatem, and you will plant. Rashi should have quoted this word in the heading of the Rashi. As we know that Rashi in his Dibra Maschil quotes the words that are relevant either to explain what's bothering him or to explain the answer of the conclusion that Rashi comes to. So if the conclusion of Rashi is that you're counting mishas netiya from the moment of the planting because it says unetatem, then the word unetatem should have been in the Dibra Maschil. The shaila is noch starker, and this question is intensified. Der Mocker von dem Pirush is from Teiras Kayanim. The source of Rashi's Pirush comes from Teiras Kayanim, the Medrash on Chumash Vayikra. Und dorten bringt sich Tage der Limud behemshich zu der Roshos of Unetatem. And over there, this Limud that you count from the planting of the tree is actually learned on the word of Unetatem, together with the other things that are learned from the word Unetatem. Aber Rashi is Mishane von Teiras Kayanim. Und bringt es auf die Werte Shaloshan Yelachem Arelim. Und der Manten ganzen in dem Wort unetatem. Rashi then goes and changes from the Teras Kohanim, although the Wort itself, the Limud itself is from the Teras Kohanim, but how the Teras Kohanim learns it and where the Teras Kohanim positions it, Rashi changes and it quotes the words Shaloshan Yelachem Arelim. and doesn't mention the word unatatem. So the question is, why does Rashi not include the word unatatem, especially since this is a change from Teras Kenim, which implies that there's a specific reason that Rashi did this. Base. The second question is really a part of the first question, on them vart unatatem, and if Rashi is not including the word unatatem, from vanavesim b'shudishal mikra dosa b'shas netiyase. How, from the words of the psukim, do we know that we start counting from the planting of the tree? Unit pirye gimel shanim drayar from peiris wachsen. If you look at the pasuk, it says varaltem or losoi es pirye shalei shanim. You could have learned from there that the pirye, from when there is fruit, you count 3 years from when the fruits begin to grow. If you don't have so the question one is, why does Rashi not include unatatem? Question two is, if you're not including unatatem, then how do you know to start counting Mishas Natiyah? Question Gimel. What is the Arichus in Rashi? The third question is the long-windedness of Rashi. Sai beha atake from Pasuk. Both, when it comes to the quote from the Pasuk, Rashi quotes the words, Shalei shanim yiyeh lechem arelim. Seemingly the word Shalei shanim would have sufficed. Sai bilishaynoi, and also in the Rashi's words, from when does he begin the count? Rashi could have written very briefly and concisely, quote the words Shali Shanim from the Pasuk, and then write Mishas Nitiyosei, 3 years from the time of the planting. And then the Rebbe clarifies in the brackets, even though this is the way it's written in Teras Kenim, and before, when Rashi changed from the Teras Kenim, we say, why does he change from the Teras Kenim? So maybe the reason why he does it here is to be consistent with the Teras Kenim. But it's been discussed many times in the Rebbe Siches that Rashi's job is not to just quote verbatim pieces of medrash, various different drushes that Chazal give us. Rashi is here to explain the basic words of the basic meaning of the words of the pasuk. And therefore Rashi often does change, and obviously doesn't bring all the medrashim. Rashi often omits many of the medrashim because they're not relevant to Pshuti Shel Mikra. Because Rashi is consistent with the simple meaning of the pasuk. So over here, even though the Teras Kenim speaks like this, but if it's irrelevant to Pshuti Shel Mikra, then Rashi shouldn't have quoted it. If Rashi is quoting it, then there has to be that it somehow connects to Pshuti Shel Mikra. The beer and them. And in Sif Beis, we're going to go straight to the beer. And the first thing we're going to do in the beer is we're going to explain what is bothering Rashi. If Rashi is telling us something, it must be that something is bothering him that has to tell me Mishas Netiyosei. So the first thing we have to discover is what is bothering Rashi. So it says like this: Rashin bepashtus art da the arichas aloshn pasuk. What's bothering Rashi is the long-windedness of the pasuk itself. First, it's in pasuk Shalosh Shanim Yilech Haramarelem. And steht doch schon früher varaltem or losi as period. The pasuk already said the words varaltem or losi, that the fruit should be classified as arla, as blocked, as unusable. Hein for was chazat ibet the pasuk nochmal die Werte Yilech Haramarelem. So why does the pasuk have to say again that the fruit should be arelim, should be blocked? Und sagt mit Bekitzer, varaltem or losi as period Shalosh Shanim. The pasuk, instead of saying varaltem or losi as period Shalosh Shanim Yilech Haramarelem lo yachel, the pasuk could have said varaltem or losi as period Shalosh Shanim. You have everything you need. You have the concept of arla, you have the fact that it's on the fruit, and you have the fact that it's 3 years. We don't need to say again yiyu lachem arelim. It seems superfluous. Nemt Rashi defun areis, and therefore Rashi derives the following. As in Orla, that Orla has 2 elements, 2 aspects to it. Aleph, der Isser von Orla auf an Eitz v'haperes, the prohibition on the fruit, on the tree and on the fruit, which in the Lomdisha terminology would be cheftza. Cheftza means the object, the prohibition on the object. As the pasuk says, va'araltem or losay as period, that the fruit become arla. Ubalosh and Rashi, as Rashi says on those words, yehe atum v'nistem milionas b'menu, it is blocked and removed from benefiting from it. So that's telling us from the words va'araltem or losay as period, the fruit are a cheftze of Isser, are a prohibited object. Base, but there's another aspect to it. They're minion from the Shalishanim. There's an aspect that you have to count 3 years. Adin afin odom gavra. This din is on the person, that the person should count 3 years. In addition to the fact that the fruit are inherently usher, the person has an obligation to count 3 years during which the fruit are usher. And how does Rashi learn this, the aspect of Gavra, from the word lachem? Lachem means unto you, you the people. So the fact that the pasuk says 2 things, and then again Shalishanim yiyu lochem arelim, Rashi understands that there's 2 things here. But altamar losayas period is that the peira, the fruit, is a cheftze of Yisr, a prohibited object, and yiyu lochem arelim, you the gavra, the person, has an obligation to count the 3 years during which the fruit are asur. And this is why Rashi elaborates and adds the words which we asked in question Gimel, that these are seemingly superfluous words. No, Rashi puts them in specifically as dar zayin moinaloi, to tell us that there has to be a counting. The person counts 3 years. And therefore, Rashi has to say the words Meimasei Moinaloi. It's not enough to know that it's Aser. There's a chiyuv on the gavra, on the person, to count the years. And then the Rebbe continues, and this is how we know that it goes Mishas Natiyah, that it's from the time of the planting and not from the time of the growing of the fruit. Umbibal der minyan is lachem. And since the minyan is lachem, is for you, is for the person, we're learning from the word lachem that it's an obligation on the gavra. Is mistaberim only makes sense as the shalishanim rechen in sich nicht von wenn der eitz is eisepedes nor von pulas adam gavra unetatem von wenn hat eingepflanzt dem eitz. Since we're saying that the obligation of the counting is on the person, it only makes sense that it would start when the person got involved. When did the person get involved? When he planted the tree. So we learn it from unetatem, but we don't need the word unetatem in the Dibur HaMaschil. We know it from lachem. From the word fact that you lachem arelim, that there's a chiyuv on the gavra to count. We know that when did the counting start? When the gavra got involved. When did the gavra get involved? When he planted the tree. And now we're going to say something else. The Rebbe is going to teach us that by learning it this way, there's actually another halachic relevance to the din of Arla, which if we learned it just from unetatem, we may not have known the answer to this. But the fact that we're learning it from lachem, and that there's an iser gavra, or a chiyuv on the gavra, to count, we now learn another halacha. Now there's another halachic relevance. Because the fact that we're counting from the time of planting is because the counting is lachem, it's on the gavra, on the person. This would lead us to conclude as the shalishanim funetiyah werden gerechet nit leiten eitz nor leiten adam, that the 3 years are counted regardless. You're going to count from the planting, but in that itself, it goes by the person and not by the tree. What does that mean? What will be the difference? If you're counting it by the 3 years by the person or by the tree, is in a fall in a case where you graft, where you take a branch from a pre-existing tree, a tree that's older than 3 years old, and you then take that branch and you plant it into the ground to start a new tree, but not just with seeds, but with a branch that already exists from another tree. If the 3 years go according to the tree, then this might leave room to say that since the branch already went through 3 years of Arla, the fruit that will now grow from this branch are mutter, are permissible right away, because this branch already did its 3 years of Arla. But if you count the 3 years according to the person that's planting, lochem, as Rashi is learning it from Yiyu lochem arelim, And that would lead us to conclude that from when the person began a new planting, you have to count 3 years from then. From then. So there's actually a relevance here. If we're saying that we're learning lachem means that we go by the person and not by the tree. And therefore, even if it's a tree that, because of this unique scenario, the tree already did its 3 years of Arla, but if then a piece of that tree then went into the ground to start a new tree, you would have to start the 3 years again, because it's about the person planting the tree, not about the tree. And therefore, since Rashi says it's Yu Lochem, it's on the person, therefore it goes by the tree, by the person, and therefore the Arla, the 3 years of Arla would start again by the new planting. Ulefiza, the Rebbe adds in the brackets, is Shitas Rashi v'Pirushi al Atera al derech hapshat, Masim et Chelek halacha shebeteira. This would mean that Rashi's a commentary, the way Rashi is explaining the pasuk, is consistent with the halacha. But the din is as echad anoiteya v'echad amav rechulu is chayiv ba'arla, that whether you're planting a new tree or whether you're grafting, which means you're taking a branch from another tree, you're chayiv arla, which fits in with Rashi. Rashi's learning from lachem and not from unatatem. Because from unutatem we wouldn't know whether it's from the tree or the person. But by learning it from lachem, we now know that it is from it is based on the person, and therefore even a mavrich, even if you're grafting the tree, you still have to count 3 years again because the adam, the person, started fresh. Now the Rebbe is going to say that with this we'll understand the second half of Rashi. In the Pirush Rashi, according to this, now that we understand this incredible chiddush that the Rebbe is explaining in Rashi, that Rashi is being mechadish, that there is a chiyuv gavra to count, from the fact that it says Yiyu lochem arelim, we learn that there's a chiyuv gavra to count the 3 years of Arla. So now we'll reach a deeper understanding in the second part of Rashi. After these words, when do you start counting? From the time of the planting. Rashi continues in the very same, under the very same heading. I would think that if the person hid or set aside these fruits, he froze them in the freezer, he preserved them, then after 3 years there would be mutter. Maybe the person is counting 3 years. So once the fruit waited 3 years, I can then eat those fruit, even if they grew during the first 3 years. But as long as the 3 years passed, I can now eat the fruit. Talmud Leimer Yiyah. So as Rashi, no, from this we learn the pasuk. It says Yiyah lochem arelim b'havayose yehei. It remains in its status. If it in those first 3 years it was aser, it remains aser indefinitely. That from first thing. So the Rebbe says we have to understand this part of Rashi. These two ideas in Rashi. Aleph, the first that you count from the planting. Beis Yachel, that if you preserve the fruits, it still remains aser after the 3 years. They seem to have no connection to each other. I mean, obviously they're both about Arla. But in the way you're touching the pasuk, they seem to not have a connection. When to start counting is an explanation on the words 3 years. When do the 3 years begin? And the words, I would think that if you hid it away, you preserved it, it could become mutter. That's a meaning on the word that it's arelim for that it stays aser forever. So Rashi should have separated this under 2 separate headings. That Shalish Shanim, he should have said Mishas Netiyase, and Yiyah Lechem Arelim Yacheli Mitzniyah. Why does Rashi bring them together in one continuous flow and under the same heading? The question is even greater. This second part of Rashi is also sourced from the Teras Kayanim. But in Teras Kayanim, it doesn't come as one continuation. Teras Kayanim learns it as a separate limud. Why does Rashi change it from the Teras Kehanim and combine the two limudim into one Rashi? However, it says that Rebbe Siv Dalet al Pianal Siv Beis is moving pashtas. But once you learn Siv Beis, which taught us that in the Easter of Arla there is also a chiyuv gavra, an obligation on the person to count. That's learned from the word lachem. Based on that, we now understand why Rashi, what Rashi brings this limud in the same Rashi and sees them as one connection. Since the pasuk emphasized that it's upon you, upon the person, as is a din in gavra kanal, that it's a din on the person, as mentioned in Siv Beis, kemen doch meinin, as es is nit nor b'shayches zum prat von shalishanim, as the meaning does ein lochem kanal. I would think that this detail that it's about the person is not just about the 3 years per se, that the 3 years are counted by the person, nor I would think that the whole arla is only an Isser Gavra. And as the Rebbe is going to explain, and because of that, I would think that after the 3 years, the arla becomes mutter. But let's not jump ahead of ourselves. And the Rebbe explains in the parentheses, because keep in mind that in the beginning of the Sikha, the Rebbe said that you have Araltem, Losias Piria is Isser Chefza, Shalish Sharim Yilach Amarelim is Isser Gavra. So if you're saying that, so the Rebbe is saying now that I would think that there's only an Isser Gavra. So how would I fix the pasuk? How would I understand the pasuk? And then I would learn that the words are not in addition to and it's only a din with regards to the 3 years. There's a zayin in their pirush and uistaitz from I would learn it in a way that the words are an interpretation, an explanation of the words that when it says that the fruit cannot be eaten, that it's only an obligation on the person and only a prohibition on the person. So I might think so. This is what I might think. That once I see the emphasis on lochem, that there's the chiyuv and the gavra to count, then I would think that Orla is only an Isser Gavra. And Yilachem Arelim is an interpretation of Araltem Asar Losei. What type of Isser is it? Lochem. It's an Isser Gavra. And if that's the case, that the prohibition of Arla is not on the fruit. It's only a prohibition on the person not to eat the fruit. But the fruit themselves inherently aren't Aser. Is done, or and that would leave room to say, as that after the 3 years, there's no Isser Arla. Even on the fruit that grew in the 3 years of Arla, because the fruit aren't Aser, it's the person that can't eat them. I would think that once the 3 years pass, he could eat those fruit. Mivolt gelernt, we could have learned, as Arla is an Isser Gavra, it is an Isser Gavra that is time dependent. As David is similar to the prohibition of eating chametz on Pesach, that the same chametz that's Aser on Pesach, midoiraisa, after 8 days, is not Aser midoiraisa anymore. The Rebbe addresses this in the Ha'ara a little bit. And even though the fact we say the chametz Shabbat of Pesach is Aser, is according to 1 day, it's midirabanon, it's a knas. So the person shouldn't hold on to his chametz. But midoiraisa, the chametz, even if it was in the possession of the yid, it's not Aser midoiraisa after Pesach. So we would say the same thing. It's a time-based prohibition. For a certain period of time, the person cannot eat it. And therefore, if he put away, set aside the fruit, after 3 years it becomes permissible. Because the time of the prohibition passed. Let it bend up from Vart Yiyeh Bava Yosei, and therefore we have to learn from the word Yiyeh that it remains Aser as the Isser Arla bleibt ständig auf the Pesach nach the Shalishanim. That the Isser Arla is not just a Chiyuv on the Gavra, it is also a Isser Chefza, and therefore once the fruit become Aser, they remain Aser indefinitely, and therefore you can't preserve them for later. So in other words, the reason it actually puts it into the same Dibra Maskil is because right away there's a question. As soon as Rashi says I'm led to think that it's only an Isser Gavra. And because of that, I would think that after 3 years, the fruit become mutter. even the fruit that grew in the 3 years. They were right with Rashi has to clarify, no. Although I'm saying that there's a chiyuv gavra, there's also an inherent iser on the fruit, an iser chefza, and therefore, once the fruit become aser, in those 3 years, they remain aser forever, because it's both. It's varalta marlosei as period. There's an iser on the pedi as a chefza of iser, and shalishanim yiyu lechamarei the chiyuv on the gavra. It's both. And with this, we understand the Rashi. We understand all the answers to our questions. Why Rashi skips on a taitem, because Rashi is learning it from Yiyah Lachem Arelim. Why does Rashi say Meinolik? Because he wants to clarify that there's a chiyuv on the Gavra Limnois. Why Rashi brings in, why Rashi does not learn from Unatatem and Dafke from Lachem, because this leads us to another limud. The limud that the minion is totally in the person, not in the tree, and therefore even Hamavrich, even if you graft a tree, you still have to count 3 years anew. And this way Rashi right away has to add the Yacheli Mitzniyai to tell us that there's also a Nisr Chefza here. Don't think it's only a Nisr Gavra, there's also a Nisr Chefza, and therefore the fruit from the first 3 years remain also forever. In the next two Sifim, Sifei and Vav, the Rebbe is going to explain this concept of Isser Gavra and Isser Chefza according to Chassidus, and give us a deeper understanding in how this Arla thing works. Because on the one hand, you have a tree, the tree is mutter. The tree is not problematic. The fruit are Aser. The fruit from the first 3 years are Aser indefinitely, Isser Chefza. But then after 3 years, the fruit that grow on this tree become mutter. So which one is it? Is it Isser Chefza? Is it Isser Gavra? How does it work? So the Rebbe is going to explain this to us al pi Chassidus with a very, very beautiful vort based on a comment of the Rebbe Rashab that gives us a deeper understanding into the whole concept of the chayas that is given to a davar gashmi, to physical things, and based on the chayas is what the status of this respective object that we're talking about. So let's take it one paragraph at a time. To go into the deeper reason between the difference between Isser Gavra and Isser Chefza. That some things are Aser inherently, the whole object is Aser. In some cases, the object is an Aser, but the person can't eat it. We can explain this that it depends on where is the energy, the life source that is sustaining this object. Where does it come from? Those things that we say that the object itself is prohibited is when the chayfetz is mekabel achayis aser. When the object receives a prohibited energy from gimel klipas atmeis legamri, from the lower level of klipa, known as the gimel klipas atmeis, the 3 entirely irredeemable klipas. They cannot be elevated into holiness. Therefore, it becomes a prohibited object, and it's prohibited forever. Keeping in mind, the whole reason why a person can benefit from the physical world is for the purpose of elevating it, of taking a physical object and elevating it to holiness, or bringing holiness into it. So when a person takes a cup of water and makes a bracha shahakal on it and drinks the water to be able to be refreshed, to be able to serve Hashem with that water, he's elevating the water into the realm of holiness. But if something if the chayis is gilum klubas atmeis, and this thing is not elevatable or redeemable, then the person can't just drink it for no reason. Isure gavra is when the zach is mekabel achayis stam from klipas nega. When we say something is aser on the person, is when this thing is receiving its chayis, its energy, from klipas nega. Was can is elevated kedusha? Klipas nega is the klipa that can be elevated into kedusha. When the father is therefore the object itself is a permissible object, because it is technically redeemable. Now, the Gavra Torah testificates about. It's just that the person at this point in time or in this situation cannot eat it. Say, for example, a person is fleishik, so he can't eat milchiks. The milchiks is not osir. If someone else can eat it, it's totally kosher. But the person who ate the milchiks, the person who's fleishik, can't eat it. So the isser is on the person, not on the food. Right now, he can't elevate it. But the food itself is elevatable. That's really even a word. Redeemable. and therefore it remains a chefta shalater. Un peiris arlos. Now let's apply this to arla. What do we say? Isur de chefta means gibul klipas atmeis. Isur de gavra means klipas noiga. What about peiris arla? Is that an isur chefta kanal barucha? We said we explained in the sikha that the fruit become an object of isur. Velas their chayis is from gimul klipas atmeis because their life source, their energy is coming from the three gimul klipas atmeis. Vidalter Rebbe brings it up in Tanya. Zalter Rebbe brings in Tanya very clearly with regards to arla and kilaya kerem, that their chayis comes from klipas, gimel klipas atmeis, and therefore there's no way to elevate them, there's no way to redeem them, and therefore they are usher and they remain usher forever. As far as the chaber nachazbara, but this still requires an explanation. Since the tree itself is a permissible thing, and the tree and the fruit are being nurtured by the tree, wie kann sein, as der ilan allein soll sein davar amuter, und die Peiris was kommen von ihm aroi soll sein a chefta shel iser. How is it possible that the trees, that the tree itself is mutter, is a permissible tree, and the fruit that are being nurtured by this permissible tree are aser, are prohibited? Then Peiris ha'ilan volten alamal given aser. If the fruit of the trees it was a type of thing that it was aser forever, volt benochi kent maas bezan. Then we could explain it. As der Chelek achayis from dem ilan from wann die Peiris and yonik zer achayis is that this part of the tree that is nurturing the fruit is sending in chayis energy from the klipos, and therefore the tree is mutter, and the fruit are aser because the chayis that's going to the fruit is aser. But since after 3 years the fruit become mutter, even the part of the tree that's sustaining the fruit, that's nurturing the fruit, is not initial iser. It's not gimul klipas atmeis, because after 3 years the fruit will become mutter. And so how do the fruit become an iser chefza? The tree is mutter. Even the part of the tree that's sustaining the fruit is also technically not technically is also not given klipas atmeis, because after 3 years the fruit will be mutter. So how do the fruit become a chefza shel iser in these 3 years? So to understand this, we have to explain the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, as we know that the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya are 100% precise. When the Alter Rebbe speaks about prohibited foods from the world of vegetation, for example, arla or kilayim. Kilayim is when two types of fruit are planted together. Says the Alter Rebbe, as they are kiyum v'chayis, is when gimel klipas atmeis. Their sustenance and their energy is from gimel klipas atmeis, from the lower level of klipas. Is medayik the Rebbe Rashab Nespaseden. So the Rebbe Rashab points out, as be'arla v'kilei hakerem le'omer v'kiyum gufam, that by arla and kilei hakerem, the Alter Rebbe does not use the word gufam, the sustenance of their body. He uses the words kiyum v'chayis. Nit wie frier bei Balichayim atmeim v'asurim b'achila, wo the Alter Rebbe sagt, as nit blei zer nefashes, nur euch kiyum gufam is von gimel klipas atmeis. When the Alter Rebbe speaks about prohibited animals that are forbidden to be eaten, the Alter Rebbe says that not only their soul or the spark of life is that's in them is sustained by gimel klipas atmeis, but even kiyum gufam, even the sustenance of their physical body, is also from gimel klipas atmeis. So when it comes to the animals, the Alter Rebbe uses the words kiyum gufam. When it comes to the vegetation, arla, for example, the Alter Rebbe does not use the word guf. It says kiyum v'chayis. Says the Rebbe Rashab, why is that? When his mazbis, the Rebbe Rashab explains, Sharei gufam fun arla chulu toir, because the body is toir. The kiyum v'chayis is when gimel klipas atmeis, but the guf is toir, and therefore the Alter Rebbe can't say that the guf is from gimel klipas atmeis, because by the fruit, the guf is not a problem. It's only the chayis that's a problem. So we have to understand, what does the Rebbe Rashab mean by this? Peiris arlas and the chasir leilam. The arla fruit are prohibited forever. Darf doch der kiyum gufam from the peiris and gimel klipas atmeis. That would mean that the body of the fruit is being sustained by the klipos, which is why they're also forever. Chefza. Und weil die Peres nehmen sich von dem Milan, was ist da weiter? Is the Echter Chayes of Peres von und durch dem Milan. If you're going to say no, but the fruit are coming from the tree, and the tree is a davar heter, the tree is permissible. That means that the Chayes is also heter. So how do you differentiate between Chayes and Guf? The Alter Rebbe says Chayes is from Gimel Kibisat Meis, and Guf not. So if you're looking at the tree, then even the Chayes is Toher. And if you're looking at the fruit, even the Guf is Tomei. So how do you differentiate between Guf and Chayes? Is there beer in them? So the Rebbe explains. The chiluk from kiyum guf and kiyum v'chayes is, what's the difference between the kiyum, the sustenance of the body, or the sustenance and the energy? The guf agesem from anivra b'shafing v'aram below is einmal. The guf, the body of something, is created once. And after that, this one-time creation is sustained. Und therefore, and therefore, you can't really make any internal changes. If you created something, let's say a non-kosher animal, once the non-kosher animal is created, it's a non-kosher animal forever. That the guf is not going to change. As it is biten them ort from vanadis kum kiyum gufam, there's no change that where the body is being sustained from is going to change along the way. No, once it was created once, and that's it. Whereas when you're talking about the life force, the life source, the energy that gives life to the vegetation or to the inanimate objects, is constantly being renewed. As is explained in many places, the Pirush that the Baal Shem Tov gave on these words, he renews in his goodness every day, consistently, the act of creation. As that every day a new chayis, a new life source comes down into the world. Und the fire can ver and ashina in them chayis. Therefore, the chayis could change. The body doesn't change, but the sustenance of the fruit or whatever it is could change. Und das sich the beer b'yisur arla. And this now we'll understand how arla works. The guf v'gashem ilam was a davar tor bleib tor. The tree itself remains tor. Because that'll never change. Once the tree was created with a chayis that's not klippos, it remains that way forever. Because in this aspect, nothing will change compared to where it was. It came from non-klippa and remains that way. But the energy with which the tree is nurturing the fruit is during the 3 years of Arla, the chayis is coming from Klippa, and therefore the fruit become an object of prohibition and remain prohibited forever, because the chayis is changeable. So for the first 3 years, the chayis that's going from the tree to the fruit is coming from Gimel Klippas Atmeis, and this makes the fruit an Isser Chefza. And then after 3 years, a new type of chayis comes down from the tree into the fruit. And because of that, not only are the fruits of the 4th year permissible and pure, they are actually holy. They're sanctified to Hashem. They're brought to Yerushalayim. They're eaten only in Yerushalayim. They have a sense of holiness to them. So it goes to the opposite extreme. Not only is it not usher, it can even be made holy. So to summarize this, generally speaking, Isser Chefza is Gimel Klipas Atmeis. Isser Gavre is Chayis from Klipas Nega. In the case of Arla, the tree is a Davar HaMuter. It remains that way. The fruit of the first 3 years are a Chefza of Isser, because the Chayis of the fruit is Gimel Klipas Atmeis. In other words, the guf, you could say, is connected to the tree, and the guf of the fruit is not aser, but the chayis of the fruit is aser, and therefore it remains aser forever. And after that, a new chayis kicks in, which makes it possible for the fruit to become toher, muter, and even kodesh.